Good morning, Bo Sandoval. How are we doing today?
I'm doing great, Gabe. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, nice to see you too. And before we dive in, I gotta ask, any good hunting trips this summer or anything coming up that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, no, definitely. The summer is really preparation time. So lots of work on. We've got two leases that we hunt on here in Texas, and then just prepping for trips that I'm going to get out of state with a little bit with some buddies. So I'll hunt upstate New York this year for the first time with some friends up there. There's some giant deer that live in upstate New York. They're pretty common, 250 to 300 pounds. They get much bigger than what they do down here in the south, in the deserts and stuff. So I'm excited about that in October. And then, yeah, I mean, it'll be a hustle and bustle of archery season starting basically, I guess it's the September 27th here in Texas, and then rifle season starting in November. So I'll do a lot in Texas. I'll get up to New York in October, and then my family's got a 150-year-old farm that is on my mother's side of the family that's down in South Mississippi. We'll hunt that around Thanksgiving, maybe a little again around Christmas. So yeah, it should be fun. My 11-year-old is really getting into it now, so this year will be kind of a pinnacle year. We're going through hunter safety right now, and he's really getting sharp with a rifle, and he's looking forward to having an opportunity at a pig or a whitetail this year. So that's a different dynamic. Setup's different, make sure you get them somewhere where they can set up and actually get steady. And whereas we're kind of jumping into these, climbing stands and lock-on stands with our bows and trying to get super tight and close. It's a different game trying to get an 11-year-old in a position to where they can try to capitalize. So that's been fun to go through that, but yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Admittedly, I don't know anything about hunting. It's not part of my background growing up. So when
Yeah,
you say
yeah.
getting prepared for that, the summer's about preparation. What does
Yeah.
that even look like? What are you actually doing to prepare?
In states like Texas, it's a big baiting state, so we can bait and we can plant food plots and things. So it's a lot of that. It's a lot of food plot care, trimming shooting lanes, so you can actually create setups to try to intercept a deer while they're transitioning, maybe from a bedding area to a feeding area. Whereas like my buddies up in New York, they're farmers, so big ag farmers, so their attractant is apples and berries and all the stuff that they're growing on their orchards. That's already there. So they're basically just creating setups on how and where they can ambush deer as they come through. But so every place is a little different. But it's kind of like sports. This is the preseason time. You're doing your final prep and making sure all your weapons are tuned and everything is dialed in so that when you show up for game day, you're ready to execute and hopefully win.
For those that may not know, Bo and I actually have a connection. I started as an undergrad at the University of Michigan as a senior, and one of my first exposures to strength conditioning was actually a session with Michigan men's lacrosse when Bo was coaching. And I remember feeling really inspired as a young coach. I mean, the energy of the session, the training was incredible. So, Bo, as you reflect back many years ago, what thoughts come to mind, or how do you think about that time period?
One thing, I'm coming to an age now. I'm creeping up on 45. I'm 20 plus years into the industry, and I'm doing a lot of reflection. And I would say for things like that, and I've heard this a couple of times now, you don't realize the impact positive or negative, that you may be having on someone that's right there at your side. And for interns and things like that, I can tell you humbly, in the beginning, as an intern, I always got excited when I got to get around someone experienced and kind of watch them do their thing, and then kind of figured out what tidbits I wanted to take away from it or things that I didn't want to use. I can say when the role got flipped and I was the person and then they were coming in to watch, in the beginning I was like, holy crap, like they're expecting to learn something from us. I hope we don't let them down. I hope that they actually get something, take something, or we don't know what they've seen before. They could walk in and be like, this is a joke. I've been around world class conditioning before. Like, what are they doing here? So you never know, and so you're just wanting to make sure that they're getting something out of it. But because at the time, to be totally honest, I was going through quite a learning curve myself. So for those that don't know, Michigan added men's lacrosse in 2012 or 13. I had zero background in lacrosse. I did have experience with other field-based sports, But I spent a lot of time with those coaches prior to even formulating the team months ahead of time, understanding their playing philosophy and how they wanted to approach the game and how they use different positions and what their job duties were, so that I could come up with some sort of plan for how we were going to prep them from an energy system standpoint. So that time frame for me, when you asked to like think about, how I think of it, big learning curve, big responsibilities, because I was getting put in a position by Mike Favor to do some mentoring and to be able to lead not only interns and graduate assistants, but also some of our younger assistants that were coming on staff at the time. And I take that stuff really seriously. I was really positively impacted by those that I got to be around when I was coming up, and I just wanted to be able to offer the same thing. I didn't want to be the weak link in the chain of education, as we're trying to pass this thing down. So it's awesome to hear when people say like, man, they got something out of spending a couple of hours with me when we were in the trenches trying to do the thing we do, which is make a performance impact on an athlete's life. And so ironically, I got a phone call out of the blue yesterday from John Paul, who was our head coach for that lacrosse team at the time. And, lacrosse has got a bid into the Olympics, and he's actually the head coach for the Armenian national team. His dad was Armenian. So, yeah, we got to go down memory lane literally yesterday. It's crazy that you bring that up and ask that question. But it brought back a lot of memories. It jogged a lot of memories, and it was a fun time, but I would say definitely still an educational time. I would not have labeled myself an expert or a tenured coach or anything like that by that time. I was still very much trying to find myself and trying to figure out where I could be the most help for those that I was servicing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned John Paul, because I think maybe a few weeks ago I actually saw Andy Moscow. Remember Andy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, at a gym nearby here in Chicago.
No
just
way.
walking through the gym. So it kind of, those things are all happening around the same time. Such a
It is
fun
a
group,
small
right?
world.
Yeah, small world, such a fun group, a ton of energy, and
Sure.
you can imagine me, my first exposure to this was that session. I'm like, okay, I think I really like this. This is really cool. I want to keep this going. So that was really awesome. So number one, thank you. But number two, it's hard to find a coach who has a more diverse background and more experience as coaching. I mean, in terms of where you've lived geographically, the type of athletes you've worked with, the wide range, the spectrum of athletes you've worked with. So what would you say was the biggest difference between Bo then and the coach and practitioner that Bo Sandoval has become now? And I know you had mentioned you're really learning early on. You wouldn't even consider yourself an expert, but now sitting here it sounds like you'd consider yourself an expert. What changed for you along that timeline?
I think as you gain experience and you add depth to your toolbox, and that's one thing that practical experience will give you. Not to mention you're still stacking the deck on your educational toolbox from whatever you may be reading or listening to or symposiums you may be attending. But all that's kind of compounded now. And so the biggest difference is, the depth of that toolbox and having it at your fingertips. And with experience comes patience. And so being patient enough to take a good observation and better assessments and really assessing what's in front of you first to identify problems, then it's just like fixing a house, right? Oh, I've got a tool to fix that thing. I'll reach in my toolbox and I grab it, and now I can go to work. And so having the patience to assess and understand what's going on, but then also having the depth in the toolbox due to the experience and due to the diversity of athletes I've been in front of, that's really served me well. I think coaches get empowered by that too. When I have discussions with and some of the most difficult-minded coaches, and we know who those are, they're competitive for a reason, and competitive people can be some of the most difficult people to kind of connect and deal with. But one of the things that has always kind of resonated is the fact that they know I'm pulling from experiences that come from several different layers of athleticism. So, because typically they're looking at a particular problem. Like if I'm talking to a softball coach about a pitcher, they're looking at why, okay, I need to get more out of this left leg, or I need to be able to rotate here more, and I'm not seeing that. I break it down on film, and I can analyze it in slow-mo, but how do you actually get them to do that? How do you get motor recruitment to happen to where they actually do that? I'm like, well, let's see. I've worked with rotational athletes in gymnastics and diving and wrestling and the shot put, hammer and javelin and throwing. So you start to just pull all these little tricks and little drills and things that you've done historically that can pinpoint that area that they're looking at. And they don't care that people always say coaches have a hard time if you don't have any familiarity with their sport. When you have familiarity with the problem that they're after. They don't care that you don't have any softball pitching experience. They don't care that I never played lacrosse. It's, can I understand their problem? And do I have a background, a tool set to say, I got something for that? Let me tell you about my experience working with this type of athlete who may actually specialize in that thing more than your pitcher or more than the athlete that you're identifying right now. So it's always served me well to get in those conversations. And coaches, you hear the analogies in every sport. Football is really, they're probably the worst or best at it with analogies. They want to go to war. Every down is a battle. It's a fist fight. You hear the same thing. You hear, a women's basketball coach, hey, in the paint, it's a fist fight. It's a war. So coming from a combat sport background, working with wrestling, taekwondo, judo, boxing, and then MMA here in the last 10 years, that always resonates. They think that, like, we've understood the mentality of what it's like to go into a fight or a hand-to-hand combative sport. And not to say that you employ anything that they would employ when they're training for boxing or when they're training for wrestling. It's just the fact that you have a familiarity with that mindset. So that's always served me well from a mental standpoint. And then, like I said, just having the depth in the toolbox and the diversity of exposure to different genres of sport, those conversations always seem to go well.
Yeah, I like
Even
a couple. Yeah,
I'm new to the sport,
yeah, I like a couple of things you said there. Just the keys: observing, being patient, and not having to find solutions immediately and inserting yourself, but really listening. It sounds like, and then having that depth of that toolbox is great. And I like one thing that resonated with me that you said was having familiarity with the problem, not the sport itself. And I think we're seeing a lot of, especially in professional organizations, a lot of organizations hiring from other sports right now. That's becoming more and more common just because maybe they see problems in a different way or can find different solutions for what is a problem and not really the sport itself.
I think some of it too is it's a comfort zone thing. When they hire folks, it's a comfort thing to know, well, this person knows basketball as much as I know basketball, so this is a good fit. They might be a shitty strength coach, but it's a good fit because of a comfort familiarity thing. I think some coaches are getting better at, I need a practitioner. I need a mechanic to go and fix the mechanics. Or, I need a baker to come in and bake better bread. They're starting to figure out that, like, I don't really care. I coach basketball. I am the basketball coach. I don't really care what they know X's and O's basketball-wise. Can you provide me a physically better product? Can you provide me with something that's more resilient, that won't break down when I play the style of basketball that I want to play, or football, or whatever it is? I think coaches are getting a little more savvy to that. They're not getting the wool pulled over quite as much in terms of, I'm a basketball guy or I'm a football guy. That's why, Instead, they're starting to understand that there's shortcomings to that. And, like, I need a practitioner. I need someone who's going to do the things that a strength and conditioning professional or a physical therapist or whatever it might be, that they're trained to do. That's what I need them to be able to do. So I think there's still a lot out there that they have comfort zones, and familiarity is a big one. And just knowing that this person played basketball, they come from a basketball background, or they played football, they come from a football background. But an interesting observation, and I've had this discussion with some of my 60 and 70-year-old mentors, is some of the best players don't end up being the best coaches. That rule gets broken from time to time, but you don't have to be a phenomenal player in order to be a phenomenal coach or instructor and whatever that thing is. You don't need to be the strongest person in the world to be an incredible strength coach, or the fittest in the world to be an incredible strength coach. But what you do need to be is knowledgeable. You need to be tactical, and you need to be able to connect dots between how your coaches want to play the sport and what the physical makeup of those people they have in front of them. Can we make those two marry each other? Can I get that personnel to be able to do their job the way that coach wants to do it? Because not every coach wants to use their quarterback the same way. Not every coach wants to use their post players the same way. So understand, how do they want to use them? Okay, now let me physically prepare them to play that way, I think is a better approach. And coaches are starting to get a better understanding of that. But there's always going to be the issues in athletics. When you have non-experts making expert decisions, there's always going to be issues, right? So you have a coach that doesn't know strength and conditioning, but they're making decisions on strength and conditioning. There's always going to be issues with that. Same way they make decisions on medical, and they shouldn't be making decisions when it comes to medical. There's always going to be issues with that. So we're never going to totally get away from that. I do think it's improving in some areas just due to better leadership and better management.
Yeah, and I think resources too. I think you're starting to see, like you mentioned, having a mechanic to do the mechanic things, having a baker to actually do the baking. Maybe in the past it was a baker who was also cooking.
Yep.
But I
Yep.
think you're starting to see some specialty roles now where like, hey, this is a speed person that's coming in to do, this is a
Yep.
speed expert coming to help with speed. And I think you're just seeing with more resources, maybe more hiring for those specific roles. But yeah, like you mentioned, like context is super important and defining things, right? You want this quarterback to play well, or you want him to, roll out and do, what does that look like? Like, let's define and break down what this actually looks like and how it's
Yep.
important within the context of this offense, right? And then being on the, having the same terminology and being able to communicate well. So, no, I appreciate your thoughts on that. And you mentioned education toolbox. So I'm going to pivot here for a second, just as
Yep.
you have done, where you pivoted into academia and at Texas A&M. And now, as I understand it, you have a role as professor of practice. So could you please expand on what exactly that is and your role now within academia at Texas A&M?
Sure. I'll first tip my hat to the PhDs because that's not what I am, or my title would say professor. So, professor of practice, I'm on the practical application side of things. And so, what kind of inspired me a little bit about what they were approaching me with when they offered me this position was that they were trying to put a heftier investment on the practical application of education to accommodate what they're already doing very well in terms of and lectures and study. And so, a little over a year ago, year and a half ago, maybe almost 2 years now, I kind of helped a little bit with nudging Dr. Brian Mann for coming over to our Cadiz department from the University of Miami. And that was kind of the start of it. And he's really kind of kicked off this strong relationship between our heavy research personnel and some of our applied personnel. And so my role was kind of to further nudge that. We have what I would call a solid education program when it comes to prepping strength coaches, but nobody knows about it. I mean, we average like 6 to 12 kids a year that are in our master's program. It's relatively small, but that's primarily because there really hasn't ever been like a massive emphasis on pushing it. Now, our department chair and dean are making a hefty push in trying to make this thing a destination. If someone wants to go get an education, a higher degree of education in strength and conditioning, we want to start shifting the mindset of I need to be at Texas A&M. That's where they're offering my best bang for my buck in terms of practical experience and intellectual know-how. And so that's what we're working on building. That's what my role is designed to help sort of supplement. I'll be teaching a master's level practicum course, which is master's C students that are pursuing a career in strength and conditioning. It'll be 50-50 lecture and practical, even though a lot of those lectures will have practical parts to them as well. So my classroom is actually a weight room within our physical education building. So we've got a lot of things to play with, a lot of scenarios to create to actually get their hands dirty and what they will actually see if they sign a contract and say, I am a full-time strength coach at this institution. So we plan to prepare them that way, but then also jogging a lot of thought. This is, we're in an ever-evolving industry, posing a lot of questions, not just, hey, here's what you should do, but what would you do if you see this? Or even posing questions I run into today. I have trouble deciphering this, so we're going to dive into it together. Because the reality is some of these that are coming in, they're bright kids, and they're not all kids. We've got a lot in our program because of our cadet program and our cadet history. We have a lot of them that have already got degrees. They've spent 10, 12 years in the military, retired, come back, want to get a master's degree. These are highly intellectual people. So I'm really excited about the cross-pollination of the age demographic that we have in these courses, but also the backgrounds and the different things they've been exposed to and what they've seen. Some of our veterans have been through, 3 or 4 different types of selection for special operations. So they've seen a lot of assessment and testing and training and preparatory processes. So I think it'll be fun to get that all in a melting pot and see what we kind of cook out of it. On top of that, I'll also heavily be a role player in placing our students in internships and fellowships across the country. We've got some pretty strong connections in the state of Texas and high schools and things like that. I think we're going to make a push to get more adventurous using some of my Rolodex as well to get kids outside the state, and some bigger institutions, some private organizations, whether it be professional sports or there's a high performance team with almost everything. Like Red Bull has one, PBR has one, the UFC has one, Toyota Racing Development has one. They're all over. Not to mention the education, your typical 4-year colleges and things that we can find opportunities in. So really trying to meet the student where they're at and finding out where their itches are and trying to put them in a position where they can go and scratch it. I think this day and age, if you want to be competitive in terms of other institutions and what they're offering, it's the experience. How much more of a wow experience can we provide them aside from just a solid education while they're here? So I'm excited to dive into that. It's a little different. It's still coaching, but I'm coaching coaches instead of coaching players every day.
What are you going by? Professor Sandoval, Professor Bo, or Coach?
I tell them just call me Bo. The whole professor thing is still, I'm sure I'll get used to it and then I'll get more comfortable. But yeah, no, I feel like I haven't earned that yet. I haven't actually taught anyone yet. So
I talked to you in a year. You go, yeah, they call me Doc.
Yeah, there you go. We'll see.
That's super cool. So as you think about all of that, and as you think about your friends around the country, what you've seen at different colleges or institutions, you mentioned making yourself competitive. What to you was missing elsewhere that you believe that you're bringing to this program here? Is it just the blend and the cross-pollination?
I won't be naive and assume to know that I know what's going on at all those other places. I just hear commentary from student experience. And for the last 20 years, I've gotten students from all over the place. So my grad students, my interns, they've come from all walks of life. And so some of the commonalities is, I would say the biggest one is the ability to connect the dot between what you're learning academically and how you apply that and what's realistic, right? The reality is a lot of our peer-reviewed research comes from these very controlled studies. It's very controlled, it's very granular in terms of observing one, maybe two particular objectives. Whereas now we're in this working world of chaos where everything is moving. We got moving targets all around us. And so trying to hyper focus on a couple of really influential objectives so that we can go and play a game better. When it live, you don't get any redos. You don't get to, that assessment didn't go correct. Well, that time is gone. You gotta kind of retime it and decide when you're gonna do it again. Or that session was about 80% accurate. Well, you don't get to redo that. You've got to figure out, okay, how do I take that 80% accuracy of that session, try to get more accuracy out of the next few sequential sessions, and essentially culminate to a improved outcome at the end of this 8 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever it is we've got prep time getting ready for whatever we're going into. So that is the reality. It is more chaotic. There's more moving variables and moving objectives, and you've got to be able to make decisions on the fly. I think the other thing is when you look at studies, it's in a condensed time frame. Most studies, where they're taking all their data in, they're less than a year. Very rarely do you find studies that are over a 10-year period of time. Now, you start getting into like normative data and things like that, you'll get into more of those studies that are for a long-term period of time. And so when you think about a coach that's planning on starting a career in college athletics, which is average 4 to 6 years, you're working with an athlete, you kind of want to figure out, like, how do I make an impact over that period of time? Because everybody gets hell bent on making an impact in that first, 6 months they're on the job, or that first semester. But the reality is you're not going to make real long-term improvements, motor skill improvements, mechanical improvements, that short a time frame. So you've got to be able to kind of have a 30,000-foot view and look at how you're making an impact on a program across 4 to 6 years. But then also, you still need to be able to dial in and look at those short time frames when you're trying to move some of those more maybe mechanical objectives around a 40 time or a vertical jump metric or a 1RM or something like that. Those can be much more acute. I do think even some of those acute metrics, though, looking at them widespread, like were we able to stay within striking? How frequently were we able to stay within striking distance of that 1RM throughout the calendar year? To me, that's a pretty high quality program if you can do that. It means your readiness is high. You're staying within striking distance of being at your capable best, not just one time in the summertime, coach, I've squatted 400 and ran a 4.640 within a day of each other. But you're 70% of that when we're actually playing games, or you're 65% of that when we're playing games. So to me, looking at data from a big picture perspective, looking at your impact as a coach and a practitioner from a big picture perspective should be more of how we measure success, not just, hey, we just finished summertime and we got 60 of our 80 guys benching over 400 and squatting over 500, and that's great, but what does that tell us about what we're doing in November? in October. So anyhow, that's, I want students and up and comers to understand that, so that they're taking and valuing, that's a big one, valuing the intellectual knowledge they're picking up in school, but they're responsible about how they're using it and how they're evaluating it as they're in the practical daily application, all the chaos as a practitioner. I think that's a lot of the big questions that we get. What you hear kids say, that especially the younger coaches, they always say, man, what I learned in grad school hasn't served me yet. It's a really naive statement. They wouldn't even have a foothold to be able to speak the language that they're speaking had they not taken some of that coursework. I hear the same thing about accreditation. Oh, the letters are good, but they don't really serve me. Well, you had to go through a series of information accumulation to be able to get that accreditation. It taught you a skill to be able to focus on something, learn a series of concepts so that you could accomplish this accreditation. Whether you value that or not, that's what you're teaching an athlete to do every day. So they're, teaching them the real side of why we value accreditation, why we value education, but how we take it and drill it down into a usable form of application. That's what we hope to provide them. I don't know if other institutions or where they put that on their priority list. I just know it's going to be a big priority for us.
I remember Mike Favor always talking about that, like accreditation. Like, you have the letters, and sure, but this actually shows us that you give a shit.
Yep.
That you're willing to take the time to learn something, accumulate information and knowledge, like you had just mentioned.
And these are high liability jobs. Like, when people can get hurt or or injured or anything like that, it's a high liability job. You may not know it, but someone is paying a hefty bill of insurance because you're there doing that. And there's nothing in a weight room that can't kill you. Everything. And people look at the most passive piece of equipment. It can kill you if you're not paying attention to it. And so these are high liability positions. So your accreditation and your education, first and foremost, get your foot in the door so that you're even qualified to do the things that we're doing. Your practical application is what keeps your job. That's what keeps you in this industry for 20 years or 30 years or 50 years or whatever. Because you start building a track record of shitty applications, shitty results, and things along, you won't be around for long. You're going to be looking for a job frequently, or you'll be unemployed. So for all the ones that are like, I just don't see the point in getting a CSCS or a college strength coach cert or whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's to show a very willing, paying employer who's going to pay a hefty bill of liability insurance that you're at least accredited to be able to do the job, so you're not high risk. But then how you apply that information is what's going to tell them they've got the right person and they want to try to keep them for the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, I also like what you mentioned about the 30,000-foot view. As a young coach, you're so eager to get in there, and you finally have athletes of, quote, your own, and you're so ready to make an impact. But the reality is, like you mentioned, at age 18, age 17, it's going to take a few years. Like, this is about development over that time span, and it's easy to lose sight of that, especially as a young, eager coach.
That a lot of that mentality comes from short-term gains. So it's no secret, man. One of the easiest things in the world to do is to make someone strong. I mean, progressive overload is undefeated for 300 years plus, right? It's the easiest thing to do. Well, then you take our demographic, 17 to 22 years old. That is the easiest demographic to apply progressive overload to show a strength increase. And so you get these coaches, they get this self-gratification because they just took a kid who's never trained before, who's 18 years old, through an 8-week program, and they put 40% on this and 80% on this and 60%, and they gain this much muscle and this much weight. And they're like, my program is magical. No, man, you just found the most opportunistic organism on earth at that time frame to expose them to. I've seen shitty programs work like that. I've seen really good programs work like that. It's not so much the program, it's just the fact that we're capitalizing on a really critical time frame in their life. So you really want to understand how influential you are. Do that over a 10-year period, because once they start getting 23, 24, 25, start working with some professional athletes and see how much you move the needle. It's going to be much smaller, and you'll really start to figure out what's making an impact and what's not. Because anything will make an impact on a 17 to 22-year-old. We've seen it. Now, I mean, how many examples do we have of those freaks that don't train at all and they're 17 to 22? Just the sport itself is physically conditioning them and honing them in and getting them to go through different stages of hypertrophy without touching a weight. And so that's what when I just don't want people to get this naive idea that you get a 17 to 22-year-old to go through these improvements, you've just mastered how to alter physiology. And it's like, try that on someone that's tenured. Try that on someone that's got, 50,000 hours of playing the sport over the last 15 years and see if it works.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I saw that in college basketball. Like, you get a freshman that comes in and all of a sudden they're practicing harder. They're sprinting harder. They're jumping harder. They're banging against other guys. And then they're actually eating. And now food is now, readily available at all times for them, which is really a critical component of it. And they could go look at the weight and they're probably going to grow after practicing that hard. So I think for sure, there has to be this appreciation for what's actually happening on the field. And that's cool. I think it's great to know that there are a lot of students out there that will be going through this program that can hear from you. Someone like you who has worked in the Olympic setting too, and in those cycles where this isn't just even one Olympic cycle. We're talking about someone who's trying to be competitive over a long period of time and go to maybe 2 Olympics, 3 Olympics even. So I think it's really cool to hear your perspective. And I imagine, this is a really exciting opportunity here at Texas A&M.
Yeah, it is. I'm excited because I kind of get to put the white belt back on a little bit. There's some really tenured and very strategic faculty that are here. And they've been super welcoming. I mean, I haven't felt unwelcome around any of them yet. I've met most of them. But just kind of settling in and finding my routine and figuring out where I can be impactful and, trying to write curriculums and get the day-to-day all set in stone. That's a new thing. It's a different kind of curriculum than what I'm used to writing in terms of sets and reps and rest periods and things along those lines. So I don't want to be one of those that shies away from difficult questions, even things I may not have the answer for. So I really want to try to create an inviting environment for these students where we can kind of, I'll have a track that we're going to go down, but if you've got explorative questions, let's throw them out there and let's start kind of nipping at some things that maybe aren't common conversation in some of these classrooms. So, and I do believe if we run into things that we don't have an immediate answer, I've got an incredible list of colleagues and other faculty right down the hall that can help us sniff out the answers.
Now that you've had the chance to, and I know you're always going to be connected to coaching, you always will be working with some athletes in some capacity.
Yep.
Most likely. Now that you've had a chance to, quote, take a step back, and just see everything maybe on that 30,000 foot view, what thoughts do you have about performance coaching or strength conditioning? Do you feel like you've been able to learn a little bit more or see anything in a different light than when you were so consumed with the schedule and working with athletes?
I mean, I'll take it on the personal side first. We get so gracious when we have, as a coach, when we have time off or if we get a holiday or something, we're so gracious. And then you come over to a world like this and we're like, wait a minute, I was doing that many hours a week for that many years, for that much pay and that little time off. And I was gracious. I was kind of, in some scenarios, and not so much me, but others that are out there, they're almost like stealing from them. This is a much more, in academia, it's much more of a 9 to 5. If the kids are off school, you're off school. So getting exposed to that and the work-life balance that offers compared to coaching. Now, I would never take any of my coaching back. I love it. I still love it to this day. If a tremendous opportunity opens up, my ass will be right back in there doing it again. But with that being said, I'm definitely much more weary. I know the worth and the value of what I bring to the table. And if you want that, 1, you're going to pay for it. And 2, you're going to pay for my time as well, not just the status quo of what other coaches are doing. I don't care what other coaches are doing. You've asked Bo Sandoval to come to the table and do what he does and offer what he does. So you're going to pay for that. And you're not just going to pay for that monetarily, you're going to pay for that in time. Because I'm at a stage where I do not want to take any more time away from my kids and from my wife. I know people kind of stumble upon that and they realize that at a certain point. Now that I've gotten exposed to how it works in other areas of employment, I'm not willing to kind of give a lot of that back up. The other thing is, I would say I don't regret anything about any of the coaching decisions or even some of the positions that I've taken over the years. But what I have become is a little bit more weary, particularly when it comes to leadership. Your job and how effective you are is directly affected by leadership. So if your leadership doesn't have a familiarity with what you do or how you do it or how you make an impact, or they don't have a familiarity of who you're impacting, that's going to make a dent on how you deliver what you deliver. And so, unfortunately, man, this day and age in college athletics, anybody can be an administrator. Anybody. It's even worse than coaching when it comes to the good old boy system. I'm just going to hire my friend. He's got a finance background. He's got a compliance background. You know, he knows something about sports, so he'd be good at managing all these strength coaches and all these medical personnel and all these sport coaches. Wrong answer. Like, unfortunately, this day and age, they don't really have like a ringer to go through to be an administrator. We got ringers to go through to be a strength coach. You're not going to just walk in and be like, I'm Gabe, I got a really good education, hire me, I'm going to be the strength coach for Texas football. It doesn't work like that. Well, as an administrator, they can definitely do a lot of that. And even when you get into some of these conference commissioners and roles and things like that, you look at some of their backgrounds and their track records of what they've done to prepare for that. It's very different than what it was 20 or 30 years ago. Most of them come from a practitioner or a coaching background and then work their way through leadership to kind of get up there. But if you've done that, you've managed people. You've managed multiple relationships. You've had to take your wherewithal and put it on the field and compete with it and understand if it works or not. A lot of these folks, unfortunately, they're not tested. They're not checked and balances that they can manage all these critical pieces. So I've definitely become much more weary of that, but it affects how I do my job. It affects my relationship with coaches and how I can service coaches. It's essentially like getting put on a leash, and the better your leadership is, the longer your leash is. I got more freedom. The worse the leadership is, the shorter the leash is. I got less freedom. And so that's important because, I mean, how much does an education cost? How much did my master's degree, my undergraduate degree cost? How much cost can you put aside the thousands of hours a week, a year that I put in over the last 20 years to where I'm at? Like, there's a value to that. Well, if you're going to take that and put it on a leash this big, to me, that's problematic. So I didn't know that before. I just figured, hey, put me in a position, I'll be successful. That was all I had the confidence to have that mindset. But I do understand now there's some uncontrollables out there that will definitely affect how you can perform. And so I'm just a little bit more weary of that. So when we always get the good advice, right, when we interview for a position, hey, make sure you interview your boss as much as they interview you. But most people never do that. I would say that's something that Mike Faber has kind of rubbed off on me and a couple of others. And I've gotten really good at that over the last 10, 15 years. It served me well moving from Michigan to the UFC. It served me well initially moving from the UFC to Texas A&M. Unfortunately, the administration that brought me in at Texas A&M, they moved on to Ohio State and they're doing great things up there. That was a little more of my flavor. The admin that's at A&M now, they're very intelligent, different strategy and different philosophy in terms of what's prioritized, and it's just not really my flavor. But then I pivot over into academics and I look at my leadership here and we're asking a lot of those same critical questions, like what is your expertise in managing a lot of these things? And it just aligns really well. It aligns to where they can put me in a great position to use my experience and use my expertise to hopefully rub off and positively influence that next generation of coaches.
Absolutely. So question for you, as I think about everything you just said, as I digest that, especially coming off of talking about working in this new program, in this master's program here. So how do you take those experiences that you've had and distill it down for a student to understand the challenges that they might be facing? We talk so much about preparing athletes and what skills can I add to my toolbox to prepare athletes, but how much do we actually discuss building a toolbox for these coaches professionally?
Number one, you don't get an opinion until you're competent. So that's number one. And that's something a student needs to be able to swallow quickly, is that you don't really get an opinion or get to give critical feedback until you're competent in what you do. Once you're competent in what you do, then yes, it matters what those around you do so that you're able to be in a position to use the skills that you have, those competent skills that you've acquired. So that's number one. That's kind of barrier of entry. You got to be competent first. But then you need to be able to use the layers of interaction starting at the bottom. So who are my counterparts? Can I interact and integrate and work well with my counterparts? That has to happen first. Then can I integrate and work well with the next level above my counterparts, their supervisors, my supervisor? Then can I work well with the next above that? So once you've gotten to that at a institution, at a place, moving on to the next place, you have the wherewithal to go and interact with that top level executive or administrator right away. You have the experience in doing that. You understand what questions to ask and what not to ask. You understand their influence and what they have control over. But you do it from a standpoint of you're trying to learn the system. You're trying to learn where can I be most effective. Just the same way I'd interview a coach. How do we want to play the game? I can interview an administrator or an executive. How do you want to manage this business? How do you want to manage us going out and winning championships? What's your philosophy around that? When you understand that, it gives you a better understanding of where you stand and what you have influence over. Because that's a decision. You can decide, hey, I have a ton of influence here. I love it. I'm going to stay there. We can also decide the way they manage things, it's not the right fit for me. I probably need to find something else based on my personality and how I like to do business, whatever. For some reason, for so many years, we know the reasons, but for decades, coaches and practitioners have been taught, just shut up and be grateful you got a job. Shut up and be grateful and just go and do your thing. But like any job, every job has value. And so you got to make sure that your value lines up with your worth. And if you can do that, if they line up together, you can be content. You can feel successful. You can feel moved and driven. You can feel fulfilled by the role that you're doing. If the second someone feels like they're getting taken advantage of, or the second someone feels like they're of low value, they're high, especially if they're high expertise, like our jobs require a higher level of expertise. If they're high expertise and low value, fulfillment, it will be at a low. And when someone is not fulfilled, they will walk. They'll leave. Money will buy you some time. You can give them a little bit of money and they'll sit tight for a little bit longer, but they're really just sitting tight until they find something else that will fulfill them. Now there is a demographic of coach out there. There's some studies that have talked about this, where fulfillment isn't the main objective. They're able to compartmentalize. They just need to be able to collect a paycheck and work with sports, and they can sit tight no matter how much they're getting abused or not getting utilized or whatever for decades. That's a real thing. Those people exist. God bless them. I wish my mind worked like that. I'd probably get more sleep and wouldn't stress out half as much. But for me particularly, and many others, we need to be fulfilled. We've gone through all the ringers of accumulating this expertise. We want to put it to use, and our fulfillment comes from seeing it make a difference in the lives of competitive athletes and competitive coaches. So put us in a position to do that, man, that's fulfillment all day long. You can retain people like crazy. You let some of that slip or show someone that they're being taken advantage of, or that their value is low, even though their expertise is high, they're going to walk.
Yeah, but compensation matters to a lot of people too at the same time,
It does.
And I think it's
And
such a saturated.
That's a fear thing. That's a fear thing, that there's not a lot of opportunity for compensation out there. But dude, in this day and age for a strength coach, there's so much opportunity. There's 50 times the opportunity of what was there 20 years ago. There's not a police department in Bryan College Station that doesn't have a strength coach or a consultant working with them. I've got 2 former interns. You may know Eddie Yoon. He was an intern for us at Michigan, a GA too. He's a strength coach at one of the largest fire departments in Metro Denver. And he's got 3 other strength coaches working for him. And I forget how many firemen they have coming through that firehouse, but it's massive. But they got this super organized program that's 24 hours a day. They're on shifts with the firemen, so they're training based on whatever their shift is. You look at the military jobs, and I mentioned all the different high-performance centers. On top of, yes, all the collegiate institutions, the professional sports leagues, but then also 50 years ago, it was rare to find every high school in the state that has a strength program. Where now there's only a couple of states that have a single high school that doesn't have a strength coach. So there's opportunities. It's what do you want to do? Now, unfortunately, a lot of people get into this because they're like, I want to go work with professional sports, or I want to go work with an NBA team. That's their only objective. So they're from the day that the onset, their blinders are on, and they're not looking at what some of these other opportunities could be. But yeah, the compensation thing, typically it's fear. It's like, well, I have to make a living and I don't know any other way to do it. So I just kind of got to eat some shit right now and get a paycheck.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of opportunity out there. We had Ben Dubin from Tempe Fire on episode 2, and it was great to hear what the great work they're doing. But I think as a college student or master's student, and you're right, sometimes we look at collegiate sports and you see what's on TV and you're like, that I want to be a part of that. That's the highest level. It's hard to, you kind of have these blinders on, and it's hard to recognize or even understand that there are so many other opportunities out there.
Sure.
Coming through my own education and practical experience, like my singular focus was in collegiate sports. I thought maybe I want to be in professional sports, but the idea that this was happening in all these different areas, I just didn't really know. So maybe that's changing over time too. And again, these programs, being around people who are now sharing their knowledge and sharing their wealth and providing, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I do think we probably don't do a great job of teaching students that, or teaching young interns that when they're coming through, that, hey, dude, there's a plethora of opportunities outside of that one thing you're kind of hyper focused on right now. I had one mentor that told me that, which was the greatest piece of single advice that I ever got, because he asked me what I want to do for a living. I said I want to be a strength coach for an NFL team. And he's like, do you know anyone that works in the NFL? I said, no, sir. He goes, oh, have you ever like talk to anybody that's an NFL strength coach? Nope. Do you know what they do day to day? Nope. He's like, well, how do you know that's what you want to do? I'm like, I don't know. That seems like the pinnacle. So he told me, he said, look, I want you to, over the next 20 years, just accumulate as much experience as you can with as many different sports and coaches as you can. Then when it comes time to specialize in something, you're going to have this depth to your toolbox. You can essentially go and do anything you want to do. That was the greatest piece of advice I got. I held on to it. And that's why I went and worked with figure skating groups and wrestling teams and club sports and, on top of all the other stuff. And I know that's not for everybody, but even if you do have that thing, you're like, I'm going to be a football strength coach in a big college school or the NFL, I would still say go out and get as much experience as you can in as many different sports as you can. Then when it comes time to specialize and apply for that job, you've got a deeper toolbox to actually be able to do that job.
It's so funny because I think when I went to University of Texas for my master's program, I was like, yeah, I want to be a professional baseball strength and conditioning coach. Like, duh. Mm-hmm. And I met with somebody who was working, I think, in AAA with the Houston Astros or something like that. I started talking to him. I was like, oh, tell me about your life. Like, what are you doing on the road, all that stuff. He starts talking to me, and I remember he's just talking, and in my head, I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, I don't want to do that at all. And you can imagine me like 2.5 years into this being like, I can't wait to do this. This is what I want. I've been telling everyone I want to do baseball. And as he's talking, I just see all of that fading away so quickly. Like, I have zero interest in this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough road. I mean, and it is one of those things require an unbelievable amount of passion. The amount of passion that doesn't care about compensation. The amount of passion that doesn't care about hours spent. It doesn't care about, and that's a special thing. Those are incredible people that have that. And I would say all of us have it at least for a phase or a stage in our life. And there's some that can hang on to it for longer. I can tell you once you start having kids and family and things along those lines, it's not that your passion goes away, your passion shifts and you're passionate about something else, not just giving your time away for free or, spending more time with a coach than you do your kids. You can get to a stage where you can make that decision. You can decide what you want to do.
Absolutely. And to each their own. And I think for me, coming up as a younger coach, I love talking to older coaches, and people have been doing it for a long time, and asking them, oh, what's it like now that you have kids? What's it like? I remember Amanda would come lift, at the facility at Michigan. And I remember, I think Grayson was like running around or something like that. I was like, oh, it's really cool. He was able to bring his family in here. But just talking to other coaches too, seeing some of the stressors and knowing what I wanted for my life personally, I knew, okay, I'm going to get to a certain point where this won't work for me. So I kind of left before that. Yeah. Quote, left. I'm still in the performance space, but it's interesting. I would recommend to many people, just talk to as many experienced coaches as you can.
That's great advice. Not to mention that decision you made is not for everybody, but people need to understand that decision is also okay. That could be actually a pretty high quality strategy. While you're young, burn the oil, man. Go and work 90 hours a week and get paid 20 grand a year. Go and do that, because when you get older and you do have a family, and you're not going to be able to do that anymore. So do it now. I mean, it can be a great mindset to have. And plus, you can still, hey, I experienced that. I did it. I stuck my nose in it. And, there's some fulfillment in that as well.
No, I mean, absolutely.
The other thing I'll say on that is when it comes to I want coaches to understand, especially up-and-coming coaches, you have more control over your career than you think. And so in being intentional about decision-making like that, hey, I know this isn't going to be forever, so I'm going to give it all I got right now and kind of eat what I can from it, because there's going to be a stage when I want to step away. Coaches realizing and understanding that's a choice. You have that choice to make. The same way that if you interview for a job, you're not obligated to say yes if they offer it to you. That just tells you get to see what all's on the table. And then if it's not right, it is okay to say, thank you for your time. It's not the right fit for me. It is totally okay to do that. Coaches think they burn bridges when they do that. No, if you're good, you're going to be recruitable the next time. So we have more control over our career than we think. But there's a lot of fear with that, and I understand that. But if I can be a voice that says, hey, you got more control than you think. You have more bandwidth than you think. You have the ability to pivot and shift. I get the question all the time, hey, if I go from college sports to private sector, can I ever go back to college sports? The industry doesn't decide that for you. You decide that. You decide if you're going to pursue one thing or another. Now, you got to be good, because if you're not any good, then and your track record doesn't show that you're any good, then they're not going to hire you. But outside of that, we have more decision-making power than I think we sometimes think. We kind of get brought up in this trade as like we're just servants, and we should be grateful that we got a job. And there's still a lot of that goes around, but we do have more decision-making capability than we think.
I completely agree, and I was not able to recognize that until afterwards, or I think around COVID, I kind of sat down and like, wait, I'm doing how many hours like for this,
Yeah.
And now being on the other side of it, number one, I wouldn't trade any of the decisions I made for anything. Like, incredibly impactful. And you know what? All of those skills, the relationships, working with athletes, problem solving, the schedules, like you talked about before, will make you so much better in other areas of your life. No question. And it was really fun at that time. But it's really great to know that there are people now like yourself going back into it, helping mentor these young coaches, and being able to do that outside of an environment that's just strictly coaching and observing, but really understanding what goes into this from an athlete preparation standpoint, but also just lifestyle standpoint. So super cool. On that note too, my understanding is you're also doing a little bit of consulting. I mean, I would love for you to maybe just hit on that for a second and what that's been like for you.
Maybe a little over a year ago, almost 2 now. I kept getting, in my career, I've been fortunate in the positions that I've held. I've always been able to be a contributor to facility design. And so it kind of dates back to my first job at Belhaven College. Like, I showed up in this old weight room that hadn't had any TLC in a while, and I essentially pulled every piece of equipment out of some old double doors in the back and repainted the whole thing, got a donor to donate a floor, put a new floor in. I didn't have an office space, so I got some money donated to have a mason come in and brick up some walls that I helped him do. And then I worked at a glass shop in college, so went to the glass shop, bought some discount windows, put some windows and a door in it so I could have an office space. So that was kind of the start, but getting to to be a contributor in some of the remodeling on some facilities we did at the USOC. Obviously, we did an amazing, South Athletic Campus project at the University of Michigan. And then, I built essentially 4 facilities with the UFC on 3 different continents. So gaining that experience and interacting with engineering and architectural firms on that process on top of the stakeholders and what they were trying to create, the environments they were trying to create, that's lent itself now into where I'm getting phone calls from some of these firms to be a third-party consultant to influence how they're planning some of these spaces, not just from an aesthetic standpoint, but from a functionality standpoint and what they're trying to get out of it, the types of athletic populations they're servicing, what all the facility is designed to do. Some are designed to be as much of a showpiece as they are a functional training piece. Others, they're not a showpiece at all. No one's ever going to put eyes on them other than the ones that are using them day to day. So So I've been doing that on the side. I've probably done 7 or 8 just freelance projects like that where they've already usually got some concept in their head. I'm just kind of helping them think about logistics, safety and safety standards, along with functionality and how they can get the most bang for their buck in terms of per square foot, like how you can get most economy out of a square foot of a building. So that's been fun, and then also a little bit of private consulting on the coaching side. So some of it's remote consultation, some of it's remote programming. I do have 1 or 2 in person that I train privately locally here. I got a pretty elite level youth jiu-jitsu player. She's top 3 in the world in her division, and she's pretty incredible. Special mindset for an 11-year-old. Extremely focused and driven. Definitely what you see on championship caliber athletes. She's been a lot of fun. Got a great family. They're really flexible and easy to work with here in town. They obviously wanted some expertise, someone that's been around combat sports, but also weight cutting sports and things along those lines. But yeah, so that's just kind of on my free time and kind of scratches some other itches and kind of helps me keep building my profile on top of what I'm trying to do with our academic program here at A&M.
Absolutely. And it goes back to what you said earlier about just creating opportunity. Like if you are number one, competent and you have the expertise, there is opportunity that you can create out there and then opportunity you can create for yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And, you got to be a little adventurous, but most of the time, like, we're more capable than what we give ourselves credit for. There's a little bit of fear, a little hump to get over with putting yourself out there a little bit. And you're going to take your lumps. I mean, I've learned a ton, doing this little business venture on my own by myself. One, I'm not an entrepreneur, so the whole dealing with taxes and setting up LLCs and doing all that stuff is so foreign to me. But kind of like going to school, man. You do your studies, you ask good questions, you make mistakes, you learn from them, and then you just, next thing you know, it's a skill that's in your pocket and you have it and you use it when you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time, and I just have a couple quicker questions as we finish up here and wrap up this conversation. Number one, as a lifelong learner, is there any area specific to human performance that you're really interested in right now, or like any rabbit holes you've been going down?
I would say, man, I have a lot to focus it in on. I'm still very much obsessed with, we have these clear-cut ideas. Like if I do this, it's got anaerobic qualities. So it's going to use this type of anaerobic energy. And here's how I refuel it and replenish it. It's very cut and dry, black and white. But as we've learned, and I learned a ton, particularly from combat sports that are oftentimes training in a caloric deficit, there's energy supply and there's energy utilization. The coordination with that, like learning how to metabolize certain substrates is just as much as a skill as learning how to press a barbell. It takes practice. It takes synchronization. It takes timing. And it takes consistency. So that's been something that's on my mind, is like how much we need more education to athletes on. One, you have to be able to be properly fueled, but you also have to be coordinated on how you utilize that fuel. Just because you're doing something slow doesn't mean you're metabolizing fat. In fact, there's some folks that struggle with metabolizing fat because they don't regularly ingest good fats. And so if it's never accessible, your body doesn't get good at using it. Energy system, or energy supply and demand, and the utilization of it is definitely something I've been just obsessed with, I'd say, over the last 5 or 6 years. And then outside of that, the further integration between things that focus on sustainability. So when it comes to like fascia and tissue quality control and things along those lines, which I learned a lot of that from our PTs and our chiropractors, figuring out how to vertically integrate and weave that into the training process just to limit the amount of damage mileage that gets put on the body on top. We know, look, we got to expose the body to tension and stress if we want to get changes out of it. But just managing that process better through better quality control of all those critical tissues, that's something that I don't know that I'll ever not. And now that that's become a very apparent thing to me over the last 5-10 years, that's just something that I'm constantly going to stick my nose in to try to figure out better ways to economize an athlete's workload.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And then for your own training, right? When Bo finally gets some time to get some training in, what does that look like?
So I just got off a heavy year and a half of some really heavy strength training, trying to get some strength back, put some muscle back on me. I was training with Ray Ellsworth over the last year and a half, and she did an incredible job just beating the crap out of me, but in a very responsible way. You know, as an older strength athlete, she's super accustomed to managing volume and load and doing it in some creative ways. So I had a blast, man. I got a lot of my absolute strength numbers back up to where they were in my 30s, which I'm really excited about. So now I've shifted gears back. I'm in a bit more heavy plyometric speed, running sort of emphasis, just trying to be athletic again. On top of when hunting season comes around, I try to get a bit more agile. I'm going to be carrying stuff and dragging stuff and packing animals out. And so just trying to boost my endurance a little bit more and my pliability. So that's kind of my focus right now. I'll still do a heavy barbell lift maybe once a week, as opposed to the 3 or 4 times a week that I was doing in the last year and a half. So, but a lot more running around, a lot more sweating, a lot more metcons and things along those lines.
Last question I like to ask here, one of my favorite ones for every single guest. I'm visiting College Station. What are you recommending for lunch or dinner? Maybe a couple of your favorite spots or one specific spot that's your go-to.
Yeah, I'll start with breakfast. It's my favorite meal of the day. First Watch. I know it's a chain and they're kind of all over. The one that's locally owned here in College Station, it's right there on the corner of campus, and it's awesome. It's got healthy options. It's got some not so healthy options. Their coffee is phenomenal. On top of that, you got to jump into coffee. I would tell you to go to, it's a new place in town. It's off of Welburn Road. It's called the Lucky Goat. Incredible coffee shop. Awesome. Me and my wife probably frequent there a couple of times a week at least now. Barbecue, 1775. Unfortunately, they're only open, I believe, Thursday, Friday, Saturdays. That's the only time they're open. And if you don't get there by lunchtime, they're probably sold out by the time you get there. Really good brisket. All their stuff is good, but their brisket is phenomenal. It's off the charts. And I've been to quite a few really good ones, including Terry Black's and all the big, credible ones across Texas. But 1775's got some incredible brisket. And then dinner. The Republic is probably one of my favorite dinner spots. Great steak and then unbelievable whiskey selection on top of that. So if you're a bourbon drinker like I am, that's a great spot. Can't go wrong with any of those.
Well, it's fantastic. Clearly outlined, and I love it from breakfast, lunch to dinner. Being back in Chicago, it's great. I probably, take it for granted, the food we have access to, but the one thing we really don't have is good barbecue, and I miss it. So 1775, I'm going to go Google some pictures of it and just pretend like I was eating it.
Man, it's just it looks like a small metal building, and there's a little smokehouse in the back. Dad started it, and then a son took it over a few years ago, but most people eat outside. They got a big covered back patio thing, and it's incredible. It's really good.
I want that.
Yeah.
I want that.
It can be done. It can be done. Come on down.
We just don't have that here. So, all right, Bo Sandoval, thank you so much for joining me on the Keiser Human Performance Podcast. Really appreciate your time, obviously, and we're really grateful for it. If anyone wants to stay up to date on anything you're doing or they want to reach out to you or get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Email. Email is easy, and I don't mind answering emails. Sometimes I'm slow, but I don't ever ignore anybody. I'm a pretty good stickler on that. My email is bsandoval@tamu.edu, or Instagram. I'm pretty active on there, although my Instagram is all over the place. It's hunting, it's family, it's some training. I don't put a ton of training on there. I'm not really trying to market myself as a fitness influencer per se on there, but there's some training stuff from time to time. But that's bo.sandoval is my IG handle. But yeah, reach out, DM, whatever. I'll usually get back to everybody. Sometimes I'm a little slow if I get bogged down, but I'll definitely get to you at some point. So I've had a lot of those conversations where I'll reach out to someone and say, I really apologize for the delayed response. And it was like 3 months ago. It was like, but I just wanted to make sure I answered your question. And so usually they're pretty understanding and responsive. But if I can get back to you in 30 seconds, I will.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll make sure that we put those in the episode notes, but on Instagram, bo.sandoval. Make sure you give him a follow, see all the cool things that he's up to, especially the hunting things. That's how I knew that he was getting ready for hunting season. Make sure you stay up to date. And I know in this field, we often say, oh, this person's, the best, this person's incredible, just, great coach, but even better person. And, Bo, I truly mean that. I appreciate it. And from the moment, we first met to obviously just seeing each other at conferences and staying in touch, you've always been very genuine, obviously very knowledgeable and honest and straight to the point and always willing to share. So I really appreciate that. So thank you for giving us your time. I know, as you mentioned, your time is valuable. So thank you for sharing your time. We're really grateful for it and looking forward to catching up with you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gabe, for the voice and the opportunity, and Keiser for all that you guys do. We appreciate that. You guys are killing it in the industry, and obviously your equipment is everywhere. So thanks so much for what you guys contribute. And yeah, keep rolling with the podcast. I was excited for the invite and kind of excited to see where else you go with getting guests on here. So
Cool.
Congrats on that.
Thank you.